There is a strange feeling many people have today, one they struggle to describe clearly. It's not exactly fear, it's not confusion either. It's more like a quiet discomfort, a sense that something essential is missing, even though everything appears to be functioning normally. Conversations feel different now, shorter, flatter, more reactive. People respond faster, but understand less. They have strong opinions, but weak foundations. They react instantly, yet rarely reflect. And most unsettling of all, this feels normal. That is usually the first sign of a deeper problem. When a society stops noticing what it has lost, not because it vanished overnight, but because it faded slowly enough to feel natural. Thinking did not disappear suddenly. It wasn't outlawed. It wasn't censored in some dramatic public way. It was replaced by speed, replaced by convenience, replaced by constant stimulation that feels productive but demands no effort. A society does not stop thinking because its people are incapable. It stops thinking because thinking becomes unnecessary, uncomfortable, or inconvenient. And once thinking is no longer required for survival, status, or belonging, most people quietly abandon it. Consider how often modern life rewards reaction instead of reflection. Fast answers over careful ones. Confidence over understanding, certainty over curiosity. We now live in a world where having an opinion matters more than knowing why you hold it. That alone should trouble us, because thinking is not just an intellectual skill, it is a form of resistance. To think deeply is to pause, to examine, to tolerate uncertainty, to admit you might be wrong, and those traits do not fit easily into a culture built on immediacy. When a society stops thinking, it does not look like chaos at first. It looks like efficiency. Everything becomes smoother, faster, more optimized. People stop asking difficult questions because difficult questions slow things down. They stop challenging assumptions because consensus feels safer. They stop reflecting because reflection offers no immediate reward. The result is not ignorance in the traditional sense. People know many things. They are informed. They are connected. But their knowledge is shallow, fragmented, and rarely integrated into understanding. A society that stops thinking becomes very good at repeating information and very bad at interpreting it. This is why the most dangerous phase of intellectual decline is not when people know nothing, but when they believe they know enough. Once that belief settles in, curiosity dies. And without curiosity, thought atrophies. You can see the signs everywhere if you know how to look. Debates are no longer about truth, but about dominance. Disagreement is treated as hostility. Nuance is mistaken for weakness. Silence is interpreted as ignorance. The goal is no longer to understand, but to win. And winning, in this context, means aligning with the loudest narrative available. When a society stops thinking, it becomes extremely vulnerable to simplification. Complex problems are reduced to slogans. Long histories are compressed into headlines. Human behavior is explained through caricatures rather than causes. This is not because reality became simple. It is because people lost the patience to engage with complexity. Thinking requires effort, and effort feels increasingly intolerable in a culture trained to avoid friction. Discomfort, once seen as a sign of growth, is now treated as a flaw to be eliminated. Any idea that challenges identity is labeled dangerous. Any question that creates tension is dismissed as unnecessary. Any pause that interrupts the flow of content is filled immediately. In such an environment, thought becomes fragile, not because it lacks value, but because it lacks protection. A thinking mind needs space, silence, time. But modern life is designed to erase all three. The moment silence appears, it is filled. The moment boredom surfaces, it is anesthetized. The moment a thought grows uncomfortable, It is drowned out by noise. Over time, people forget how to sit with a question without rushing toward an answer, and that ability is the foundation of thinking. Without it, the mind becomes reactive rather than reflective. It responds but does not examine. It consumes but does not digest. It absorbs but does not integrate. This is how a society can be saturated with information and starved of wisdom at the same time. The danger is subtle, because nothing appears broken. Technology works, institutions function, entertainment flows endlessly. But beneath that surface, something essential weakens. The ability to reason independently, the courage to doubt popular narratives, the patience to follow an idea to its conclusion. When those abilities fade, people do not become silent. They become louder. Noise increases as thought declines. Opinions multiply as understanding disappears. And the loudest voices are often the least examined. This creates an illusion of engagement. Everyone is talking, everyone is reacting, but very few are thinking. And here is the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. A society that stops thinking does not feel oppressed. It feels entertained. It does not feel controlled. It feels comfortable. And comfort is far more effective than force. Because force creates resistance. Comfort creates compliance. When thinking becomes effortful and comfort is always available, the path of least resistance wins. People do not consciously decide to stop thinking. They simply stop practicing it. And like any unused ability, it weakens. Eventually, the very idea of deep thinking feels foreign, even threatening. Questions begin to feel like attacks. Reflection feels like waste. Silence feels unbearable. At that point, a society does not need censorship. It self-regulates. People police each other's thoughts. They shame complexity. They mock hesitation, not because they are malicious, but because thinking disrupts the fragile comfort they depend on. This is how intellectual decline sustains itself, not through ignorance, but through habit. And habits shape identity. When people no longer see themselves as thinkers, they outsource thinking to systems, leaders, algorithms, and crowds. Responsibility shifts outward. Judgment becomes collective rather than personal. And once that happens, the individual mind loses its authority. This is the moment when a society truly stops thinking. Not when ideas vanish, but when responsibility for thought is surrendered. And the most disturbing part is this: a society can function like this for a long time. Productivity continues, consumption increases, innovation appears to persist, but the inner life grows thinner. People feel restless, anxious, and unfulfilled without understanding why. They sense something is missing, but cannot name it, because naming it would require the very skill they have neglected: thinking. This is not a moral failure. It is a structural one. The environment trains the behavior, and the behavior reshapes the mind. But what is trained can be untrained, and what has weakened can be strengthened. That is where this journey leads. But before we talk about recovery, we must understand the mechanism. We must understand why the mind willingly trades depth for comfort. Because until that is clear, any attempt to think again will feel unnatural, exhausting, or pointless. And most people give up right there. In the next block, we will examine the psychological engine behind this decline, not ideology, not conspiracy, not blame, but the simple, uncomfortable truth about how the human mind avoids effort and why modern comfort makes that avoidance feel rational. To understand why a society stops thinking, we must first confront an uncomfortable fact about the human mind. The brain does not naturally seek truth, it seeks efficiency. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. For most of human history, survival depended on speed, not depth. quick judgments kept us alive. Hesitation could mean death. The modern problem is not that the brain uses shortcuts. The problem is that our environment has turned shortcuts into a permanent way of life. Thinking deeply requires energy. It demands attention, focus, and the willingness to tolerate uncertainty. The brain experiences this as strain. Comfort, on the other hand, feels safe, predictable, effortless. And the brain will always choose the path that conserves energy unless there is a strong reason not to. This is the psychological foundation of intellectual decline. When comfort becomes abundant and thinking offers no immediate reward, the mind quietly disengages, not because it is weak, but because it is doing exactly what it was trained to do. Modern life amplifies this tendency at every level. Consider how often you are required to think deeply just to function. Most tasks are automated. Decisions are simplified. Options are curated for you. You do not need to calculate. You do not need to remember. You do not need to reflect. Systems think on your behalf. And while this increases convenience, it slowly erodes mental responsibility. Over time, the mind adapts to this environment. It becomes excellent at scanning, at reacting, at selecting from predefined options, but it becomes poor at questioning the options themselves. This is where the illusion begins. People believe they are thinking because they are choosing, but choosing between pre-selected alternatives is not the same as thinking. True thinking begins before the options are presented. It asks, why these choices? Who framed them? What assumptions are embedded within them? A comfortable mind rarely asks those questions, because questioning disrupts ease. Psychologists refer to this as cognitive economy. The brain prefers explanations that feel complete, even if they are false, over uncertainty that requires effort. This is why simple narratives spread faster than complex truths. It is also why emotionally charged explanations are more persuasive than accurate ones. Emotion feels like understanding, clarity feels like truth, but both can exist without comprehension. When a society stops thinking, it does not stop processing information. It simply stops evaluating it. The mind shifts from analysis to acceptance, from exploration to repetition, from curiosity to confirmation. This is where cognitive biases take over. Confirmation bias ensures people seek information that supports what they already believe. Availability bias makes recent or vivid examples feel more important than they are. Social proof convinces individuals that if many people agree, the idea must be correct. These biases are not flaws, they are features, but in an environment designed to exploit them, they become liabilities. Comfort strengthens bias. The more comfortable an idea feels, the less likely it is to be questioned, and the less it is questioned, the more powerful it becomes. Over time, beliefs harden into identities. Once this happens, thinking becomes emotionally risky. To question an idea now feels like questioning oneself, and the mind resists that instinctively. This is why many people respond to disagreement with anger rather than curiosity. Anger protects identity. Curiosity threatens it. A society that stops thinking does not do so because people lose intelligence. It does so because thinking becomes emotionally expensive. Uncertainty feels dangerous. Ambiguity feels uncomfortable. Reflection feels slow. Comfort offers immediate relief. Scroll instead of reflect. React instead of analyze. Repeat instead of investigate. Each choice seems insignificant, but habits accumulate, and habits shape cognition. Over time, the mind becomes trained to avoid friction. Anything that demands sustained attention feels exhausting. Long arguments feel overwhelming. Nuanced discussions feel unnecessary. Silence feels intolerable. The mind begins to crave stimulation rather than understanding. This is not addiction in the dramatic sense. It is conditioning. The brain learns that relief is always one tap away. Why wrestle with a difficult idea when distraction is instant? Why sit with doubt when certainty can be borrowed? Why think when someone else is already telling you what to believe? This is the psychological trade being made. Depth is exchanged for ease, responsibility is exchanged for relief, and meaning is exchanged for comfort. What makes this particularly dangerous is that the transition feels voluntary. People believe they are choosing comfort freely, but choices are shaped by environments, and when every system rewards speed, reaction, and certainty, the mind adapts accordingly. Slow thinking begins to feel abnormal. Deep focus feels like effort, and effort feels unnecessary. At this stage, thinking is no longer avoided consciously. It simply fades from habit. This is how a society stops thinking without realizing it, not through coercion, through convenience. And once this pattern is established, it reinforces itself. A mind trained for comfort struggles when confronted with complexity. Complexity produces anxiety. Anxiety pushes the mind back towards simplicity. The cycle repeats. Over time, people become less tolerant of ideas that require work. They dismiss them as overthinking. They label them impractical. They mock them as pretentious, not because the ideas lack value, but because the mind has lost its endurance. This is intellectual atrophy. Just as muscles weaken when unused, the mind loses capacity when under-challenged. And like physical atrophy, it does not happen overnight. It happens gradually. So gradually that people mistake limitation for preference. I just don't like thinking about that. I'm not into deep stuff. It's not that serious. These phrases sound harmless, but they reflect a deeper resignation, a quiet acceptance that thinking is optional. And once thinking is optional, it becomes rare. This is not a condemnation, it is a diagnosis, because only what is understood can be changed. In the next block, we will look at how modern systems intentionally or unintentionally reinforce this psychological tendency, not as villains, but as environments that reward passivity and punish depth. And we will examine why escaping this pattern feels so difficult once it is established. When a society stops thinking, it is tempting to look for a single villain, a government, a technology, a generation. But the truth is more subtle and far more dangerous. The real cause is not one force, but an environment that quietly trains behavior over time. Human beings adapt, always. We adapt to climates, we adapt to routines, and most importantly, we adapt to mental conditions. If an environment consistently rewards shallow engagement and penalizes depth, the mind learns accordingly, not through instruction, through repetition. Modern society does not tell people, do not think. It simply makes thinking unnecessary for participation. You can function, you can work, you can socialize, you can even feel informed, all without ever engaging deeply with anything. This is a historical anomaly. For most of human history, survival demanded thought. You had to remember, you had to plan, you had to understand patterns in nature, behavior, and time. Mistakes were costly. Ignorance was dangerous. Thinking was not optional. Today, the opposite is true. Systems absorb the cost of ignorance. Navigation systems think for you, algorithms curate for you, feeds decide what matters. Headlines summarize complexity. You are rarely punished for not understanding, and almost never rewarded for understanding deeply. This is where the environment becomes decisive, because behavior follows incentives. If depth offers no advantage, depth disappears. Consider how information is presented today. Ideas arrive fragmented. Context is stripped away. History is condensed into slogans. The goal is not comprehension. The goal is engagement. Engagement means reaction. Reaction means speed, and speed is hostile to thought. Thinking takes time. It requires staying with an idea beyond the moment it first appears. But modern platforms are designed to interrupt. Before a thought can fully form, something else demands attention. A notification, a recommendation, a breaking update. The mind is constantly pulled forward, never allowed to settle, never allowed to integrate. Over time, this creates a specific cognitive style, a scanning mind, a mind trained to skim surfaces, not explore depths. It jumps from idea to idea without building internal structure. This is not stupidity, it is adaptation. The mind becomes exactly what the environment rewards, and what the environment rewards is responsiveness, not reflection, visibility, not understanding, presence, not depth. This has profound consequences, because thinking is cumulative. Understanding builds layer by layer. When attention is fragmented, those layers never form. People accumulate facts but lack frameworks. They know many things but understand few. This is why conversations feel shallow, not because people lack intelligence, but because shared depth no longer exists. Everyone is reacting to the same surface signals. Few are engaging beneath them. Education, once a refuge for deep thinking, has not escaped this shift. In many systems, learning has become transactional. Information is delivered, it is memorized, it is tested, it is discarded. The process rewards recall, not reasoning, speed, not synthesis, correct answers, not good questions. Students learn how to perform knowledge rather than inhabit it. They learn what to say, not how to think. This conditions the mind early. Curiosity becomes secondary. Compliance becomes valuable. Over time, many people associate thinking with evaluation, stress, or judgment, not with exploration, so they avoid it, not consciously, habitually. Outside of education, entertainment fills the gap. And entertainment is not neutral, it shapes perception. Stories used to require patience. They unfolded slowly. They demanded attention. Today, entertainment competes for attention. It must be immediate, visceral, constantly stimulating. Subtlety struggles to survive. And while entertainment is not inherently harmful, when it becomes the dominant mode of engagement, it trains the mind to expect stimulation without effort, meaning without struggle, resolution without reflection. This creates a psychological dependency. Anything that does not immediately entertain feels boring. Anything that demands work feels excessive. Thinking becomes associated with discomfort, and discomfort is avoided. At this stage, the environment has completed its training. People no longer need to be distracted. They distract themselves. They fill silence automatically. They avoid long thoughts instinctively. They mistake mental busyness for engagement. This is how a society stops thinking without noticing, not because thought was forbidden, but because it was crowded out. Another critical factor is social signaling. Modern environments are intensely social. Opinions are public. Reactions are visible. Alignment is rewarded. Deviation carries risk. When people express thoughts, they are no longer simply thinking. They are performing identity. This changes everything. Once thought becomes performative, honesty declines. People begin to think in ways that protect belonging rather than truth. They adjust conclusions to fit social expectations. They avoid questions that might isolate them. Over time, the safest thought becomes the shared one. And the shared one rarely challenges the group. This is not oppression, it is adaptation to social pressure. The mind learns what is acceptable and avoids what is costly. The result is conformity disguised as conviction. Many people believe strongly, but their beliefs are fragile because they have never been tested internally. They were inherited, absorbed, repeated, And repetition without reflection creates certainty without understanding. This is fertile ground for manipulation, because when people stop thinking independently, narratives think for them. Stories replace analysis, emotion replaces evaluation, meaning is supplied rather than discovered. And once meaning is outsourced, control follows naturally, not through force, through framing. The environment defines what questions are askable, what topics are discussable, what doubts are respectable. Everything else is ignored or dismissed. Over time, the boundaries of thought shrink, not because people are forbidden to think outside them, but because they no longer imagine doing so. This is the most effective form of control, the kind that feels like freedom. People choose from options they did not design. They defend narratives they did not examine. They react passionately to issues they barely understand, and they feel informed while being directed. This is not a failure of intelligence. It is the predictable outcome of an environment that rewards comfort over confrontation, ease over effort, clarity over complexity. When a society stops thinking, it is not because people lack brains. It is because the environment trains them not to use them fully. And once this training is complete, reversing it feels uncomfortable. Thinking deeply feels slow, lonely, even threatening, which is why many people resist it when reintroduced. They mistake discomfort for danger, effort for inefficiency, silence for emptiness, but discomfort is the doorway back, because the mind regains strength only through use. Just as muscles rebuild through strain, thought rebuilds through friction, and friction has been systematically removed. In the next block, we will confront the cost of this removal, not abstractly, but humanly. We will examine what happens to individuals and societies when thinking disappears. How manipulation becomes easier, how identity becomes brittle, and why the loss of thought ultimately leads to a loss of freedom. When a society stops thinking, the damage does not remain abstract. It does not stay confined to ideas, debates, or intellectual spaces. It becomes personal. It shows up in how people feel, how they relate, how they decide, and how they live. The first cost is psychological. A mind that does not think deeply does not become calm. It becomes anxious, because thinking is not only about analysis, it is about orientation. To think is to understand where you stand, why you believe what you believe, and how your actions connect to meaning. When that process weakens, people lose internal coherence. They feel busy but empty, informed but confused, connected but isolated. An unthinking society produces individuals who are constantly stimulated yet deeply unsettled. This is why anxiety has become so widespread, not because life has become objectively harder for everyone, but because meaning has become thinner. Without reflection, experiences pile up without integration. Nothing is processed. Everything is reacted to, and a reactive mind never rests. People scroll endlessly not because they are curious, but because stillness feels unbearable. Silence confronts them with unanswered questions, so they avoid it. Distraction becomes self-medication. This is the quiet suffering beneath the surface. People feel lost without knowing why. They feel pressure without direction. They feel exhaustion without effort, because their minds are constantly active but rarely purposeful. The second cost is relational. When people stop thinking, conversations lose depth. Listening becomes waiting to respond. Dialogue becomes performance. Disagreement becomes threat. Instead of exchanging ideas, people defend identities. And when identity is at stake, curiosity dies. Relationships become fragile. Misunderstandings escalate quickly. Empathy declines because empathy requires imagination. It requires the ability to step outside one's own immediate perspective. And that ability depends on reflective thought. A society that stops thinking produces polarization, not because people disagree, but because they cannot understand disagreement. They interpret difference as hostility, nuance as betrayal, complexity as manipulation. This fractures communities. Families struggle to talk. Friends avoid meaningful topics. Public discourse collapses into slogans and outrage, not because people are evil, but because the cognitive tools required for understanding have weakened. The third cost is moral. When people stop thinking, responsibility erodes. Decisions are justified by trends rather than principles. Actions are excused by popularity. If everyone is doing it replaces, is it right? This is dangerous because morality without thought becomes obedience. People follow norms without examining them. They adopt values without questioning origins. They outsource conscience to authority, culture, or group consensus. History shows where this leads. Not immediately. Gradually, atrocities are not committed by monsters alone. They are committed by ordinary people who stop thinking critically about their actions. A society that stops thinking becomes capable of great harm while believing itself innocent. The fourth cost is political. Democracy depends on thinking citizens, not informed citizens. Thinking ones. Information without reflection does not produce wisdom. It produces noise. When people stop thinking, political power concentrates. Narratives replace debate. Emotion replaces policy. Fear replaces analysis. People vote based on identity, outrage, or fatigue, not understanding. And leaders learn quickly what works. Simplify, polarize, distract. A population that does not think deeply is easier to manage, not because it is weak, but because it is predictable. Predictable reactions are easier to manipulate than thoughtful responses. This is how freedom erodes quietly, not through force, through apathy, through overload, through resignation. People stop believing their thinking matters, so they stop using it. The fifth cost is existential, perhaps the deepest one. When a society stops thinking, individuals lose a sense of authorship over their own lives. They feel carried by events rather than participating in them. They react to trends instead of shaping direction. They consume meaning instead of creating it. Life feels smaller, not because possibilities vanished, but because imagination shrank. Without thinking, people drift. They follow routines without questioning purpose. They pursue goals they did not choose. They measure success by external signals rather than internal alignment. This produces a quiet despair, not dramatic, subtle, a sense that something essential is missing, even when life appears full. Many people feel this but cannot articulate it, because articulation requires reflection, and reflection requires thought. The tragedy is not that people stop thinking. It is that they stop noticing what they have lost, and once loss becomes normalized, recovery feels unnecessary. But here is the turning point. The cost of not thinking eventually exceeds the comfort of avoidance. Anxiety grows, meaning collapses, trust erodes, systems strain, people feel manipulated but cannot explain how. They feel angry but cannot direct it. They feel exhausted but cannot rest. This is the moment of crisis, not societal collapse, cognitive collapse, the moment when reaction no longer satisfies, when distraction no longer soothes, when comfort no longer comforts. This is where societies historically either decline further or begin to awaken. The difference lies in whether individuals reclaim responsibility for thought, not collectively, personally, because thinking always returns at the individual level first. A single person who begins to reflect again becomes uncomfortable. They notice contradictions. They sense manipulation. They feel out of sync. At first, this feels isolating, but it is the beginning of clarity. Clarity is rarely comfortable. It exposes illusions. It dissolves borrowed certainty. It demands responsibility, which is why many people retreat when clarity appears. They mistake discomfort for danger and return to comfort. But those who persist discover something important. Thinking restores agency. It reconnects action with meaning. It rebuilds coherence. A thinking mind becomes harder to manipulate, not because it knows everything, but because it questions, it pauses, it examines. And that pause is powerful, because manipulation thrives on speed, and thinking slows things down. In the final block, we will explore what happens when individuals choose to think again in a society that has largely stopped, not as heroes, not as rebels, but as human beings reclaiming something essential. We will explore what it costs, what it offers, and why this choice may be the most important one of our time. When a society stops thinking, awakening does not happen all at once. It never starts with movements, revolutions, or mass realization. It begins quietly, with one person noticing that something feels wrong, not politically, not ideologically, internally. A subtle discomfort with borrowed opinions, a fatigue with endless reaction, a hunger for something more grounded than noise. This is where thinking returns, not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of self-respect. The first thing that happens when a person begins to think again is discomfort. Clarity does not arrive gently. It disrupts. Old certainties begin to crack. Familiar narratives lose their grip. Previously accepted ideas start to feel incomplete. This is often misinterpreted as confusion, but it is not confusion. It is reorientation. For the first time in a long while, the mind is no longer moving automatically. It pauses, and in that pause, awareness expands. People who return to thinking often feel out of place, not superior, not enlightened, just misaligned. They notice how fast conversations move, how shallow reactions are rewarded, how quickly complexity is dismissed. At first, this can feel isolating, because thinking deeply in a non-thinking environment creates friction. But this friction is not a flaw. It is evidence of regained sensitivity. A thinking mind becomes sensitive again to contradiction, manipulation, and incoherence. It starts to detect when something does not add up, not because it knows the answer, but because it knows how to ask. And this is where power quietly returns. A thinking individual becomes harder to manipulate, not immune, but resistant. They do not react instantly. They do not accept narratives unexamined. They do not outsource judgment easily. They pause, and that pause breaks the spell. Modern systems rely on speed. Speed keeps people emotional. Emotion keeps people predictable. Thinking interrupts that loop. It slows response. It restores choice. This is why thinking is not encouraged. Not because it is dangerous in itself, but because it disrupts momentum. A society that stops thinking runs smoothly. A society that starts thinking again becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability threatens systems built on control. But this is not about overthrowing systems. It is about reclaiming agency. A thinking person does not need to shout. They do not need to convince. They do not need to dominate discussions. They simply stop being carried. They choose what to consume. They choose what to question. They choose when to engage and when to remain silent. Silence, for a thinking mind, is no longer emptiness. It becomes space, space for integration, space for memory, space for meaning. This is where something profound happens. Thinking reconnects the individual to time. Past experiences are examined rather than buried. Present moments are inhabited rather than escaped. Future possibilities are shaped rather than feared. Life regains depth, not excitement, depth. And depth sustains. People who think deeply are not constantly entertained, but they are rarely bored. because boredom is not the absence of stimulation. It is the absence of meaning, and thinking generates meaning, not artificially, organically, through understanding. This is the quiet revolution, not dramatic, not viral, but transformative. When individuals think again, relationships change, conversations slow down, listening improves. Disagreement becomes informative rather than threatening. Not everyone appreciates this. Some feel exposed by thoughtful questions. Others feel unsettled by silence. A thinking person does not rush to fill gaps, and gaps make people uncomfortable. So friction remains, but so does integrity. Thinking restores alignment between belief and action. People begin to notice when they are acting against their values. They feel internal resistance, and instead of numbing it, they examine it. This produces moral clarity, not rigidity, clarity. A society that begins to think again does not become perfect, but it becomes conscious, and consciousness changes everything. Manipulation loses efficiency, outrage loses potency, fear loses immediacy, not because problems disappear, but because perception sharpens. People stop confusing intensity with importance. They stop mistaking popularity for truth. They stop outsourcing meaning. And once meaning is reclaimed, comfort loses its dominance. Comfort is no longer the highest value. Understanding is. This does not mean rejecting ease. It means refusing to let ease replace purpose. Thinking does not make life harder. It makes life honest. It removes illusions. And illusions, while comforting, are costly. They demand constant maintenance, constant distraction, constant reinforcement. Truth, once seen, requires less effort to carry, even when it is uncomfortable. This is why thinking ultimately feels lighter, not immediately, but sustainably. The greatest threat to a society is not ignorance. It is the belief that thinking is unnecessary. The greatest defense is not intelligence. It is responsibility. Responsibility for one's own mind. No system can think for you. No authority can replace your judgment. No algorithm can supply meaning. That work is personal and unavoidable. The future of any society is shaped not by how much information it produces, but by how many individuals are willing to think with integrity, to pause, to question, to reflect, not loudly but consistently, because when enough people think again, the culture shifts, not through force, through depth. And depth changes the direction of everything it touches. So the question is no longer what happens when a society stops thinking. That part is already unfolding. The real question is this: what happens when you start thinking again?